Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I come to the floor today to bring attention to a particular provision of the bill now before the Senate, a provision that would do so much to help our country fulfill its promise to our veterans, and that is to expand and strengthen the VA's Caregiver program. This program may not be well known outside of military family circles, but make no mistake, the Caregiver program could be a game changer for the estimated 5.5 million people across this country who've put their lives on hold to care for a loved one who returned from service with illness or injury. I met one of those caregivers not too long ago in my home state of Washington. Tiffany Smiley wears many hats. She is a mother, a wife, a nurse, and a veteran caregiver. She and her husband Scotty first met back in junior high, and years later they were married. He signed up to serve our country, and Tiffany became a military spouse. And then in 2005, she got the call every military family fears. Scotty had been severely injured in a suicide bombing in Iraq. He was alive, but he'd lost his eyesight permanently. As Tiffany described it, her world was shaken to its core, and their lives were never the same again. But Tiffany, like so many military spouses, didn't think twice about whether she would care for her husband and their growing family. It was just a matter of how she could do it. To this day, Tiffany is an amazing advocate for the Caregiver program and what it has meant to her and to her family. She describes both the good days and the bad days, so those of us not in her shoes can understand at least some of the challenges they face. She does it because she knows she's not alone. And she knows that sharing her experience is making a difference to educate the rest of the country about what it means to be a veteran's caregiver. And it's so true. I've heard from countless people who, when their loved one came home from service with an injury or illness, made big life changes, like quitting a job, or scaling back their hours, or taking leave from college. They put big purchases and retirements and dream vacations on hold, or they took on more parenting responsibilities, you name it. They sprang into action and did what they needed to do because it's just what you do when it's someone you love. But we know the care our military caregivers provide comes at a cost. Several years ago, in fact, the Dole Foundation commissioned the largest ever study of its kind to examine the sacrifice of military caregivers. It showed some caregivers spend more than 40 hours a week caring for veterans. That is the equivalent of a full-time job, and that takes a toll. The study showed caregivers have significantly worse health than non-caregivers, and they run a higher risk of depression because they put their own physical and mental well-being on hold. And the stress of providing care can strain relationships and increase divorce rates. So caregivers, or as they're often called, our hidden heroes, don't necessarily wear a uniform or go overseas, but they sacrifice a whole lot, and they serve our country in ways most people find unimaginable. That is why expanding the Caregiver program to veterans of all eras is so important, because the program provides resources and support. It includes training and counseling, includes a stipend, access to health care, respite, and more. And this bill expands the support services for caregivers to address their still unmet needs. And that includes offering financial and legal advice to deal with the so many complex and difficult challenges that arise that are unique to being a caregiver. And not only does the Caregiver program recognize the sacrifice of caregivers, it also puts decisions about care into the hands of the veteran and their loved ones. They can decide to be at home or with on-site care or on their own terms, as independent as possible, and that is really important. And the fact that we are so close to getting this program expansion across the finish line goes to show how far we have moved this conversation, but also why we have to keep pushing it forward so veterans and military caregivers never feel like they have to face these problems alone. Because the reality is, if a service member is hurt while fighting for our country, the responsibility of care should never fall to only one family. It is the responsibility and the duty of our entire nation to have their backs and get them what they need. Because we can't stop until we get this done. We can't stop until every veteran and military caregiver knows that their country is there for them, on their terms, no matter what. I am so proud the Caregivers program expansion is front and center in the VA Mission Act, now before the Senate. And on behalf of Tiffany and Scotty and all the other military families out there, I urge my colleagues to express your support for this critically important program. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.